Greetings sailors, and welcome to a bit of a talky video about the Rogue Wave event. Now this has almost been slightly superseded by the mild amount of drama that went with the announcement of the Naval Training Centre, but I'm going to leave off talking about that until things are a bit more settled, because that's all. I mean, there's been, you know, a whole bunch of CCs not happy about it and have publicly said so, and the community's not been happy about it, and Wargaming went away and had a big long meeting yesterday and announced, you know, that they had heard our concerns and we're going to look at it again and tone things down a bit, and, you know, they were going to address the things that the community, that the player base is actually worried about. So that's all in flux at the moment. Nothing's really settled. We don't really know what form that's going to take, and so that's going to be a topic for another day. Rogue Wave, on the other hand, that's very firmly upon us. Basically, if you didn't start almost immediately grinding, then there's no way that you can get the Benham for free at this point. One of the things I want to talk about is quite how grindy this event is. I mean, I kind of alluded to it in the video for the Hill, and even just the process of getting the Hill for free is fairly grindy for just a not great tier 5 destroyer. But the Benham is at a whole other level. To get the Benham, you have to complete nearly every day, as something like 30 out of the 40 days that the event runs for. And so, although technically the Benham is available to grind for free, practically speaking, there's not going to be that many people that will actually manage to get it for free. Now, in principle, what they've done isn't terrible. They've made it so that, okay, if you miss some days, you can buy some of these containers and get some tokens, and so therefore, theoretically, you're still going to be paying less than the cost of buying a tier 9 premium up front, which is around £50. It's not cheap. You know, I should maybe make the point that I occasionally do, that premium stuff in World of Warships and World of Tanks, and, you know, obviously World of Warplanes as well, it's not cheap. Microtransactions in these games are rarely anything but. That said, we've had similar events for grinding out ships in the past, where if you spent the time grinding and did the missions, then you would get the ship for free, or else just not have to pay for very much. And the one that I'm particularly thinking of, you know, the one I've particularly had in mind is the Cossack event, where it wasn't technically free, but you had to spend like less than £1, it was like €1 to get the top up of the tokens that you needed in order to get the ship. So if you did put the time in grinding, it was pretty cheap, and even if you didn't, it still was possible to get a decent ship for not that much. Now, my problems with the current event come from, well, it's kind of twofold. I mean, the grind itself is the classic free-to-play tactic of create a problem and then sell the solution, and Wargaming can get away with a bit more than full-priced games can, because it is a free-to-play game. This is how the bills are paid at Wargaming, for the most part. They have produced, published games, not particularly big games otherwise, but they have published just straight-up single-player, you pay and buy the game games, which is a very elegant way of putting it. But for the most part, their products and titles have been free-to-play stuff. Or at least the ones that pay the bills are, anyway. So, compared to when a AAA publisher does it, and it's just straight-up, you know, egregious bullshit, it's a little bit more acceptable when a company like Wargaming starts doing things with loot boxes. But there are still degrees of bullshit at play here, and I think this event has just tipped down the scale a bit too far. Now, Wargaming themselves have been doing this sort of event for a while. It first cropped up in World of Tanks, where they call them marathon events. Actually, I think that's what they call them in Warships as well. But yeah, basically the opportunity to grind for a bunch of, grind to a bunch of goals, and then at the end of it, you get some kind of ship. And in the case of World of Tanks, I mean, compared to some of the grinds I remember doing for that, the one I specifically remember is the Type 62, but there's been a bunch since then as well. They basically tied it to the different national lines, and if you didn't have enough tanks or suitable tanks to do the mission requirements, then you were a bit out of luck, and you just had to buy the tokens to fill the national missions. Now, they're less restrictive in Warships, so overall that's a good thing, but they have just been slowly turning up the heat as far as the grind of the various freebie missions goes. And okay, yes, this is a tier 9 ship, so okay, you would expect it to be reasonably grindy, but I would contend that we've gone over the line into the point where it is unreasonably grindy, precisely because Wargaming wants to sell these containers. And that's one of the differences with this compared to previous ones. You're not just buying the tokens that you need at face value, as with the Cossack, you're buying containers. And they're quite expensive for what they are. I mean, if you're just buying one or two, then okay, it's not that bad. They're about £4 in UK currency. I don't know what that would be in other values. It would be a little bit more for US, and probably a little bit about the same, if maybe a little bit more for euros. I don't know. Pound sterling isn't doing that well of late, and that really hasn't been for the last 2 years, all thanks to Brexit, but that's an entirely separate topic. Let's not go there for now. So yeah, the individual boxes are quite expensive, and the part where it gets obscenely expensive is, well, you can just buy enough of these containers, these loot boxes, to get the tokens you need to get the Benham without doing any of the grinding whatsoever. But if you do that, it's going to be somewhere in the region of £175 or $220 US, which is obscene. And this is the part where I'm going to call manipulative bullshit on Wargaming, because as much as I think the Benham is a decent ship overall, it's situationally overpowered, but other times, like any torpedo destroyer, if people are aware you're there and actively dodging out of the way, then you're gonna struggle to do the damage as much, particularly because the individual torps aren't as damaging as Japanese torps. So although you are more likely to get individual torp hits than, say, a destroyer where you're having to reload for almost twice as long, because that's one of the key strengths is the fast reload, you're not as likely to get the devastating hits as you are with a Japanese destroyer using the torpedo reload booster. So, that in a nutshell is what I think of the ship. It's decent, but in no way is it £175 decent. That is the cost of quite a lot of other premium ships put together, which would altogether be better value for money. But because Wargaming has done it how they've done it, because they've made this incredibly grindy event where in order to get sufficient tokens, you not only have to do the directives, but you have to do the daily missions as well. And those are strictly tied to the Rogue Wave. Some of the directives, like the directives at least you can do with just playing random games, and even like if you can get a bunch of people together and do Narai over and over again, for example, then you will complete the directives, and it'll take you some time, but at least it's not that obnoxious, because it's relatively simple stuff, like earn extra amount of credits and do X amount of damage and get X amount of torpedo hits, stuff like that. So it's not like it's stuff that's going to be frustrating, it's just plain grindy, although that's its own kind of frustration potentially. But the Rogue Wave stuff, yeah, that's a bit of a bit more of a sticky problem, because that's the point where the mode itself is okay for a, you know, short burst. It's kind of like frontline mode in World of Tanks, but unlike the reward tank for playing frontline modes, you can't just keep plodding away and doing a season here and doing a season there. I mean, if you were hardcore grinding it, you will have gotten your Emil 1951 already, but the Emil isn't going away. You know, this isn't a 40-day event where if you miss more than 2 days, you're going to have to pony up some cash. It's just, you know, you can keep plodding at it and eventually you will get the Emil. Whereas with the Benham, well, it might go on sale at some point, but we don't know for sure. I don't know if that's been confirmed somewhere. It certainly wasn't mentioned in the official news articles. And even the Hill, I think we can assume, will be on sale at some point, but at the moment it's only available as a bundle with a vastly inflated price compared to a lot of other Tier 5, in fact all Tier 5 premiums. It's on a par with some of the Tier 7 premiums, or is it the Tier 6 premiums? No, it was the, yeah, I was looking at this, it was Tier 7 destroyers. You can pick up a Tier 7 destroyer for about the cost. In fact, in some cases cheaper than the cost of the bundle to buy the Hill. So, you know, that alone is a bit naughty, the fact that it's this time-gated bundle, and they've sold the Hill with the premise of you get a mission, which you can grind, you know, you just like play a game every day and you can grind some of these extra tokens, but it's only a couple. And honestly, for the number of tokens you can get, I think it's actually better value to buy the containers, even though the containers are themselves not particularly good value. So yeah, this is the part where it is kind of manipulative and a bit bullshit, because we've got this whole, as it's called, fear of missing out factor going on, and Wargaming is hoping that at least some people will either just not have the time or the patience and will pony up ridiculous amounts of cash for a pixel ship that is quite frankly not worth anything close to it. And I don't doubt that Wargaming has already made, well, considering the price of the thing, 175 quid a pop, you know, even if you've done a few days grinding, it's not going to reduce it by that much. So, yeah, they've already made thousands and thousands off this, I have absolutely no doubt. In fact, possibly into the tens of thousands, globally speaking. I mean, it might not be that much. I hope it's not that much. I hope people have had, generally speaking, a level of self-control, but Wargaming have set the whole thing up so that people will look at the grind and think, well, that's bullshit, and reach for their wallets. And even the people that are doing at least part of the grind, they're hoping will at some point go, well, this is bullshit, I don't want to do this anymore, and reach for their wallets. And previous events, I don't think have been anything like this bad, and they certainly haven't felt this manipulative. There's at least been some notion of, okay, this ship will be on sale for the regular, you know, unbundled price, at least, you know, at some point, even if the bundled version has been available for a week first. And not that I approve of that either. That is still basically playing on people having poor impulse control. It's not exactly, you know, good and ethical corporate behaviour, is it? But I think we're on a slightly different level here, just because of the sheer amount of cost involved. Now, my last point as to why I think this is manipulative bullshit, it comes back to the fact that it's containers versus buying the tokens directly. Now, you can look at it as the containers de facto being the tokens, but as I've said, if even you just look at it that way, it's still not good value for money. When you look at the other stuff that you can get in the containers, it's still not good value for money. It's actually, compared to the, let's say, Christmas containers or some other event containers we've had, where, yeah, you can you can buy a bunch of them, but you know, let's say you spend £175 on Christmas containers, and I'm sure there were people that did. You would at least get that nominal value of stuff, if not more, in terms of premium ships, in terms of doubloons, in terms of premium time. And of course there's all the other stuff like camouflages and credits and Elite Captain XP and coal and all the other stuff they pack it with that they assign some monetary value to, but really isn't worth money because it's all stuff that you can get yourself in game. These containers, yeah, they're really not good. Fellow community contributor Helios, no, not Helios, Eclair. I'm getting my CCs mixed up there. He has, with previous container events, basically set up a spreadsheet for the CCs to put their data into, and it's usually not a huge sample size based on the, you know, it kind of depends how many containers Wargaming give us, because they're hoping we'll show them off for free and, you know, promote them and get people to buy them. And in this case, yeah, no, hell no. This is the opposite of that. Yeah, he puts together a spreadsheet and basically tracks all the you know, the output of the ones he's gotten, and then puts it on Google Docs, and we can all enter our own values in. And presuming everyone's being honest about the values they're putting in, and I guess why wouldn't they be? You usually get a sample of like a couple of hundred, and in this case I think it was about 270, or did more people put there? No, 270, that was the final count. So that was a bunch of people putting their results in. Not all the CCs, but a bunch of us. The results are pretty poor. In terms of the amount of stuff you get out, most of it is basically credit stuff, or stuff you can, you know, stuff you can get in game. Most of it is stuff that I do not value as being worth money. Things like, well, I'll actually run down actually. Coal, Captain XP, the camos that you can actually grind in the current event, which they're okay camos, but I don't think they're like super amazing. Straight up credits, and obviously there's the fuel tokens in there. I think you get 15 fuel tokens per container, which isn't a huge amount. And there's also the Type 59 camos, and again it's a camo, but that one does have a doubloon value. You can buy that one in port, but it's still like there are plenty of camos that, like, there's probably not that many people that buy the Type 59 camo. There's plenty of decent camos out there, and even if you don't have the good money-making camos, the standard camos are not particularly expensive, and it's not that hard to get a couple of the decent flags and stick them on a premium ship. Technically, theoretically, you can also get doubloons and premium days. But I think, let's see, 2 people out of 270 boxes opened, only 2 of them contained 400 doubloons each, which isn't a lot. Really isn't a lot. You could also get 7 days premium. 24 containers had that, which again isn't a lot. We're still in the single-digit percentages here. And then there are the event permacamos, which you can just buy in the shop. Now, a regular tier 10 permacamo, if you are unaware, costs 5,000 doubloons if you buy it in game. If you go to the Arsenal, what do they call it these days? I keep calling it the Arsenal in my head, and they changed the name. Armory, there we go. If you go to the Armory and go to the event section and have a look, you'll see that you can buy these camos for 6,000, or if you have the individual ships you can buy them as well. Now typically the full remodels Wargaming has sold for more in the past, so it's not entirely unexpected, but given that it is functionally a tier 10 permacamo that has the same benefits as a regular tier 10 permacamo but costs more than the normal tier 10 permacamo, yeah, I mean, it's not hugely great value for money, and if there was one or two you wanted, then you would specifically go and just buy them yourself. So having those as being one of the container rewards potentially is not that great. And again, they weren't a particularly high drop rate. They were about the same drop rate for the small sample that we had. In fact, the exact same drop rate as the 7 days premium. It was 24 out of 270 crates opened. So these boxes are incredibly poor value for money. There isn't even that argument to be made, that you're not getting a lot except an incredibly overpriced tier 9 premium if you go down the route of buying the boxes. And if you spent the same amount of money, around £50, as it would cost to buy one of the other tier 9 premiums, that would only get you, what, a bit over a quarter of the way there in terms of tokens? You would still have to do a shit ton of grinding. So this is why I am unhappy with Wargaming over this particular event. I think they've gone just a bit too far, in fact more than just a bit too far, over the line in terms of trying to manipulate their player base into either spending a really long time playing a mode that's going to get tedious long before you get to the end of the amount of time you need to spend grinding, or else pony up for these containers which are incredibly poor value for money. I'll stick Eclair's like the little graphics he came up with, but he reckoned they were worth about 588 doubloons per container, when the cost, like just for the doubloon cost of the potential stuff that you can get in them, versus what is it, like 1250 doubloons if you buy them in game. It's really I don't know, it's not good Wargaming. It's not good when you do stuff like this. We're getting towards the shabby end of the free-to-play market with stuff like this, and so this is why I felt compelled to specifically make a video on it, rather than, as I had originally planned to do, just a video on the Benham itself, which, as I said in my little aside, I think is okay and situationally overpowered, but only sometimes if it's allowed to be. If there's things with radar around and people are actively dodging and you're getting countered by other destroyers, then it's going to have far more limited opportunities, just as a Japanese torpedo destroyer would do. And it really is only the reload that makes it as powerful as it is, rather than the number of torps it gets. So I think that about wraps this video up. Hopefully you out there watching this have been sensible and decided not to dump a bunch of money into this nakedly manipulative event. I feel overall Wargaming's been trending towards trying to do things around selling containers, aka loot boxes, aka surprise mechanics, if you are the consummate bullshit artists at EA. But yeah, I don't think it's a good trend. I get that they have to make money, but it is entirely possible for a free-to-play game to make money by not manipulating people, and doing so in a rather naked fashion as they are here. I think I expect better from World of Warships, and I expect better from Wargaming. I mean, even if, let's say for argument's sake that they did it as with the Cossack event, you just buy the tokens, you buy the thing that you want to buy, and it's not packaged away in an incredibly poor value container. And let's say that the value of tokens is like a quarter what it is now, and it's pitched so that around about enough tokens to buy you the Benham up front would, say, be £60. And so even if the event was as grindy as it is now, I would feel like it was far less manipulative and far better value for money to go and buy some tokens to reduce the grind. And it would still be, like, if you just bought it up front for £60, it would still be really expensive, would still be more expensive than the tier 9s, and it would still be a really expensive purchase for a single, you know, in-game purchase, because that would get you quite a lot of games, especially, you know, at the moment Steam summer sale, £60 would get you a fair few games. But it would still be a lot fairer than what Wargaming is actually doing, where we have something that's like, you know, 3 times as expensive if you just buy it up front, and is in no way worth that amount of money. Anyway, so I'll be curious to see what the comments section is like, what people think of this. I don't think there's going to be that many people defending Wargaming somehow, because it's fairly naked. It's not really trying to hide what it is very hard. But I still will be curious to see what people think anyway. Hopefully you have found this little bit of editorializing interesting, and if you have, you can do all the usual things down underneath the video. And of course, as always, stay tuned for more.